Hello, this is the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I am your host, Neil Horowitz. You can find me on Twitter, NJH287, also on LinkedIn, where I post more content, the website for the podcast, and other content, as always, dsmsports.net. And we hope you can find the podcast on whichever podcast platform is your favorite to listen to. Just a tremendous show for you guys today. This is like an all-timer. I've been doing this podcast for almost 11 years, and this is one of the best episodes, so you definitely want to listen to this full thing. My guest on the podcast today is Dan Gadd. He is a legend in the industry. He is the Senior Vice President of Growth for the Atlanta Dream in the WNBA. He talks about his experience there, what he's building there with the Dream, some really great stuff. Talks about his time with the Atlanta Falcons, AMBSE, with the Jacksonville Jaguars, Chicago Bears, with Taylor Strategy. He has just so much good insight from his years doing this thing, from being a leader, from guiding content teams, guiding strategy, now with the Dream, leading growth, and how really connecting the dots across the board to make sure that everyone is really rowing in the same direction, leading toward the same goals. You're going to want to take some notes. You're going to listen to this multiple times. This could be a full college course, in my opinion. Just a master class coming up with Dan Gadd. So listen up, get your notepad ready. One of the best interviews you're going to hear on this podcast with Dan Gadd of the Atlanta Dream. I am back with today's guest, and honestly, we should have just been recording this whole time because I learned so much every time I talk to this guy. My guest on the podcast today is Dan Gadd. He is the SVP of Growth for the Atlanta Dream. And welcome to the podcast today, Dan.
Neil, I appreciate you having me on. We've run in similar circles for a long time, and I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. So it's great to actually be talking to you and on your podcast. This is awesome.
Well, I will say this is not the first time your name has been uttered on this podcast. I think I've had guests on over the years that have shouted out you, and you are a luminary in the space. So I am psyched to pick your brain today. Before we get into the meat of the content, Dan, tell us about you. Tell us about your career path, your stops along the way, and any tips for folks that want to try to do what you do.
Yeah, I'll say this, and I've mentioned this story before, but it does kind of live with me a lot. I was not looking to get into really into the digital content space, but there's all these moments that kind of stick out in your life, and one of them for me was freshman orientation in college. We had a dean at our school that spoke to us, and one of the things she said was, "We're not going to teach you how to do a job, but we're going to teach you how to think. So when a bigger opportunity comes along, you know how to take advantage of it." And I would say that has probably I don't know why that stuck with me. I don't know why I remember it so well, but that has probably been one of the most defining things of my path. Every stop along the way, and I've had a bunch of them, I've just been blessed to be around some really, really smart people and learned a ton from them. And I've picked up different things over the years. And I'm getting older now, Neil. So I've been around for quite a while, but I feel like I've got things that I've learned at every stop of the way that has made me more versatile and let me see, quite honestly, the whole system and the whole operation a lot better.
Yeah. So how'd you get started? What was that first dip in the industry?
Yeah, my first job out of college was as an intern with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I got hired by a guy named Jeff Imperial in the broadcast department down there, and they had won a bunch of Emmys, and Jeff was literally a teacher for telling stories through videography, and so I could not have landed in a better spot and learned from somebody right out of college the way that I learned from him. And that was I thought I was going to be, my career goal was really to be more in front of the camera and be like a sports anchor or something like on news, and I got fascinated with the stories that they were telling, and so that turned into I just worked my tail off there, and that they had a position open up as basically like a web video person. So this is like 2000. This is early days of the internet, basically. But I basically started producing web content for the team. But the cool thing about that gig was it was such a small team. This was back before there were league platforms or agencies doing websites. So they were doing their website in-house. So there was only 3 people working on this website and a writer. And so the person that was the webmaster was a guy named Steve Hall. And one of the good things about joining that web team was it was a small group, and we had to do everything. And our webmaster was a guy named Steve Hall, who could do anything on a computer. He had a photographic memory, could memorize anything, could program basically anything. He knew everything from graphic design, nonlinear editing, and anything that was on a computer, he could do it. And so I was hired to basically produce video for the team to get posted on the website, but I started learning things like web design and graphic design, and he got me introduced into analytics and started doing HTML and CSS and all these other things. And all of a sudden, I stayed there for about 5 years, but I was much more than just a videographer and editor by the time I was done, because I had to do a little bit of everything that he was doing, because I was essentially his backup. And so, I ended up going for a position that I could have never dreamed of going for when I landed in Jacksonville. And that was to be a website manager for the Chicago Bears. And I got hired there. And, again, I didn't know anything about the web when I was I knew that I could browse Google and, get onto websites, but I couldn't put a site together. I couldn't run one. I'd never even thought about it. I had no idea how they were, coded and put together and designed. And now all of a sudden I'm running one for, a major NFL team. And it was unbelievable. And, same thing kind of happened there. Like, I went in there and think I'm going to be doing website and email, and that's going to be my role. And I'm going to make those as good as possible. And oh, here comes social media. And that just absolutely exploded. And I was always into the content side of things. So I was very much into like the editorial side. We had a writer, so I was overseeing that with Chicago, and we were trying to drive as much traffic with our content as possible. We spun up a video position, hired a guy named Chris Wink, who is one of the all-time greatest video storytellers. And so he was my first hire in Chicago, and was just, amazing. And so we had that team, and here comes social media. And all of a sudden, now all of these things that had worked in terms of web content for that avid fan base that was coming to the website every day, we thought we were going to be geniuses and put that stuff on social. And we were going to, we're going to drive all this traffic back to the website, increase the numbers, and we're going to look like geniuses. Well, funny thing, the stuff that worked on our site did not work on Facebook or Twitter at all. And we had to take a step back and go, wait a minute, okay, what's going on here? There's a different audience out here. This is not the avid group. This is just people who have basically followed the account because they're a fan of the team, but they're not paying attention to us on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They're maybe tuning in on Sundays, but that's about it. And all of a sudden, a group of us kind of went, hey, there's a bigger opportunity here, because these people don't come to our events. They're not on our email lists. They're not coming to our website. We don't really have contact with these people. And if we can get them thinking about the team more, we have a chance to actually strengthen the fan base here. So we went hard at work at basically building out content buckets and just testing a bunch of stuff. And this was really my probably the first big foray into like trying to develop a content strategy from scratch, because up to that point, I'd kind of learned the ropes of what was working on websites. This was starting from scratch and really just testing a bunch of stuff. And we just got better and better and better at it. We had a very small web team, but at that time, Facebook had a number that we considered to be the most important one. It was people talking about this, I think was the name of it.
I remember that.
And we just went hard at, like, even we had I think that in one of those years, I think my last year there, we had a losing record, but we dominated the league in that statistic just by like really focusing on, hey, how do we get these people to have some kind of commenting or reactions to this content? And it was so that was kind of the start of really the next transition of my career, and really teed me up to go to Taylor, which I think was probably the most transformative stop along the way. So I landed at Taylor, and I'll be honest, the first 6 to 9 months there, it felt like I had just landed on Mars. I did not know what was happening. So Taylor was a traditional comms agency that was spinning up a digital group. And so I got hired to basically come in and be a digital consultant and they only worked with tier 1 brands. So it was unbelievable. We basically at that time, we only had 15 clients at a time, but they had to be category leading brands. So we were working with like Allstate, Capital One, Tide, Jordan Brand, Mercedes, on and on and on. And so it was a fascinating place to be, but the guy that was leading it at the time was a guy named Jackson Janayagam. And he is one of the best team builders. He's the best team builder I've ever been around. And what he did, it was a fascinating place to be, because agencies can be very cutthroat, right? Business. And a lot of times there are people, I think, the stereotype is a lot of people looking out for themselves. And Jackson put together an absolutely brilliant team of people, but he had it working as a group that understood, if Mike Dolan wins on this account, that's good for the whole group. If Matt Arnholz wins on this account, that's good for the whole group. If Amanda Lordy wins on this account, that's good for the whole group. And so what happened was we ended up with a group of really diverse backgrounds and skill sets and views of the digital world who you could not get us off the phone with each other. And we had a main office in New York, and I was in the satellite office in Charlotte, and there was no distance. I mean, I was on the phone with them all day long, and we were running our ideas by each other constantly. So the collaboration, was just phenomenal. But the thing that I was, the learning moment there was, it, I'm coming from having done content for 10 plus years, and I'm coming into these brands and who are at this time, this is still the early days of social media. This is like 2012, 2013, and brands are still trying to figure out the space. And and I couldn't figure out why everybody was so bad at it at the time. And I had to really start listening, to what all the agencies were telling the brands. And to be frank, the creative agencies were driving most of the conversations about what was going on social. And then we'd come in and try and provide suggestions to change the strategy. But all of the creative agencies, and I still think there's a lot of this in the industry, they were using processes built for TV advertising that go back to the 50s, right? And they were using them as content processes. So it was like, what is our brand messaging?
Yeah.
What is our brand equity? What is our product differentiation? And that was the start of the creative process. And then they basically were producing ads. And then they would post them on Facebook and Twitter. And then all the brands were saying, oh, organic reach is dead. No, the content's not content, it's advertising. And so I had to really start to hone how I was going to communicate this and build out kind of communication languages to, at the time, it was a lot of like comms clients or marketing clients that had not been in the digital content space yet. Mm-hmm. And so how we were going to communicate and translate this was a big challenge. And this was a big moment for me was, like I said, the first 6 or 9 months, I got in this rut of, we have to make money by selling these ideas in. But the ideas that the clients wanted were the things that matched their campaigns, essentially. But now they're trying to put it on social, and it's not working. So I'm in this position of I've got to sell them what they want, but I know it's not good. I know it's not good content. And I was really struggling with that because I'm like, I know that I'm putting things in front of these clients that are just not good content. But it matches their color scheme, and it matches their brand equity, or it matches their tagline, right? And so we had a break between Christmas and New Year for a week. And there was a night where I was up we had a little bonus room upstairs, and I went up there and I just did a lot of thinking about like where I was, because I had just moved my family, including a 1.5-year-old daughter, from Chicago to Charlotte. And I kind of felt like I was failing. And I felt like I'm like, I don't know where this is going. I don't feel good about, the things that I'm putting in front of people. I don't feel like I'm driving any really good creative content here. And it kind of hit me. I was like, well, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down telling clients what I think they need to hear instead of what they want to hear. And so I came back from that break, and there was, I don't know if this was coincidence or what, but there was a brainstorm on a brand that I wasn't on yet, Tide, who was just getting into the NFL sponsorship space that year. And I threw out an idea around the draft. And I said, I know that I wrote it out exactly the way I would have done it if I was in the NFL. I mean, this is what you need to do. And that turned into, they bought it. And we basically signed a player we signed basically the top 40 guys, prospects going into that draft. And the deal was the contract went into effect if they were the first pick for a team. So we got their first post, and that thing went absolutely haywire. So it was the start of the Our Colors campaign in the NFL. And we dominated the other brands in that draft. And that kind of like turned everything around for me. It was like, okay, I'm now going to go in and I'm going to put the best things I can, and I'm going to sell these. I'm going to sell the things that are going to work in this space. I'm not going to keep putting things in front of clients that I don't believe in. And so I had to build out a communication model on how are you going to now tell people that are built on these other processes that you have to flip all this. And so I started building out models. Like the creative process has to start with research and insights. You can't jump right into brainstorming, and it can't start with questions like what is our brand equity and what is our, or what is our brand message. It has to start with what are people interested in. Otherwise, it's not going to work in this space. So that's where I think I really, really sharpened my ability to build strategies. We had some unbelievable strategists with that group. Amanda Lordy was phenomenal. Jackson, the leader of that group, was just brilliant and hugely, hugely creative. He's a rock star now. Everybody should look him up. He's amazing. But I still talk to this day with Mike Dolan and Matt Arnholz and a whole bunch of that crew, because they were so good, and I learned so much from that group that I came out of there and I just had I had a very different assessment of the landscape coming out of there. And so, one of our clients, what happened to be AMBSE, who was at that time, they were launching the new stadium, Mercedes, which became Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And so we were helping them with some comms and digital work around that. And while we were helping, they decided they were going to go through a digital transformation. And they were really, really bullish on being different in the space. And so we had a little sports group. Sam Bear was a big part of that. So a group of us with Bo Wolf went out to Atlanta a couple times to just kind of like help them bridge the gap on the digital transformation. And I remember walking out of there with Sam one day, and I said, just the way they were talking about the path they were going to clear for digital, I was like, somebody's going to have a chance to come in here and build one hell of a content strategy, because they literally want this to be great. And so I threw my hat in the ring,
Wow.
and Morgan Shaw Parker made the worst decision of her life and hired me. And so jumped in there, and those next couple of years with Atlanta were, I think, just the culmination of everything. It was almost magic. The talent that group had, Austin Hiddle is still there, but we brought Chris Wink back from the Bears. He had been out in the NBA for a while, and brought him in, and we hired Kyle Ben Zion, who just became and sometimes like an extension of me in a lot of ways, where I knew he could go into a meeting and make sure that everybody was on strategy, and that I didn't, and that allowed me to play some other roles, because we had an amazing group. Chris Jones, who just phenomenal job of trying to help everybody understand what was going to work in the space, and help organizational communication with that. We had Nico Tan, just as creative as all get out, and we brought in Matt Tabik from a digital managing editor, who's now front office sports. Like, that team is where that team has landed. Is you got Chris Jones, who's leading content with Publix, and you got Eric Hansen, who's over broadcast and marketing with the Charlotte MLS team, and Austin Hiddle is an absolute rock star in the video world now. He's in the Wall Street Journal and all over the place, and on and on and on. Kyle's has a just phenomenal gig with Hilton, and I could go on all day about that team. And it was magic there for several years, and it was a lot of fun to that team. That team, I think, is, for me, one of the benchmarks. I talk about the Taylor team and the collaboration they had, but that group and the creative synergy and the trust that group started to have with each other, it was very, very easy for me to basically just get the group in the room and tee up, what we were going for and what the goals were, and what outcomes we were looking for, and just let them start collaborating. And it was not people fighting for their own ideas, because that group was on the same page about what we were trying to achieve. When they heard a good idea, people build onto each other's ideas, and that was just magic. So that was just a phenomenal experience, and they've still got a great crew there. They've brought in Scott Kegley now, and they've got Ryan Mucatel, who I worked with at Taylor, is the SVP over all of that, and they're it's still a just unbelievably talented group. They've got a big studio now and doing great things. So it's been fun to kind of watch the what has happened there. But so that was the Falcons. Loved, and I still talk to that crew all the time. I talked to Jonesy this morning. I get text messages egging me on from Hiddle, and still in touch with Wink. Most of that crew. Tabik calls me nonstop, and I wish he would stop every once in a while. But it's, we had a lot of fun there. But Morgan took the job as team president with the Atlanta Dream. And a couple months later, she and I just started talking, and honestly, Neil, the conversation was, hey, the level of collaboration that we had between social and video and editorial and UI UX on that bigger digital team. What if we could take that and rebuild an organization and have everybody on the same page, and trying to establish that same synergy across the whole organization, where everybody has the exact same goals, the exact same motivations, and the exact same priorities. And so that we can build on each other's ideas. We can build an entire organization where ideas thrive because everybody's on the same page. And then the same thing, when a good idea comes out, people build on it because they know it's getting us closer to the goals. And so that's what we've tried to do. And it's, we're still working at it hard every single day, but I'm super, super proud of, just the fact that if you go on, like, there's a whole bunch of stuff on TikTok, like sales versus marketing. If you watch our sales and marketing teams work together, it's just magic. Like they trust each other. They lean on each other. They collaborate. I mean, they share space, and there is constant chatter between the ticket sales reps and our digital marketer, for instance, and they're sharing insights with each other. And the ticket team trusts that the marketing team is going to drive all the leads that they need, and the marketing team is doing an absolute unbelievable job of driving leads and driving sales as well. And they take a lot of pride in that. So, and it's just a lot of fun to watch those things. And same thing on the sponsorship side. We hired Layla Brock as our SVP of corporate partnerships and community impact, and it's just amazing to be able to go down and we can have any conversation that we need to, in terms of like, hey, can we try this instead? Or, hey, let's do this. Or what do you think about this? And she's doing a big event right now for Microsoft and Xbox. And it's amazing to watch that team work and build that stuff out and get everybody in the organization involved in it.
Man, I just want to ball it up. Like, we get into the podcast now and we have a great episode. Like, that's a master class, and I just love the themes that are consistent through your story as well. Like, even going back to what you said, that story that resonated with the professor about learning how to think, and and those moments we had with the Bears of, like, this is a different audience on social that's coming to our website. I think you can't take that for granted. And the collaboration at Taylor and thinking about, let's not start with the what and the brainstorming, let's start with the who and the why. And that goes with the Bears as well. Like, what's our audience and why do they care? Why do we care? What do we want them to do? And there's just so many good themes there that seem to play out and seem to have colored your career at every stop and in a good way, of course.
Well, without a doubt. It is, if I hadn't been all those stops and seen the way that some of those people carried out their jobs and learned, and go to the Falcons and ticket sales was a huge deal there too. So we had to go from just creating great content and trying to grow the fan base and do all these great digital executions to how can we drive as much revenue as possible. And so, a couple of us just kind of rolled up our sleeves and said, well, we know we can crush these, kind of cost per view metrics with paid social. Let's see how good we can get on the lead gen side and drive people through a funnel essentially and help the ticket team out. And, the last 2 years that we did that, 2019 and 2021, because of the pandemic, we had a 15 to 1 return on ad spend in 19 and a 17 to 1 return on ad spend in 2021. Just by constant tweaking. And it was such a collaborative thing because I would be watching the paid dashboards, but we had Austin Klubenspies, who was our UI UX guy, who's now a VP at an agency. I think he's 18 years old and is a VP. I'm lying. He's older than that, but he's a rock star. But I was in collaboration with him and Greg Urbano from basically looking at over UI UX, and I talked to Greg about, hey, what are these? What is Google saying in terms of what's happening on our site when they get to these pages? And then I would be talking to Eric about, hey, we need to either tweak this on this page, or I need another graphic. This one popped, and we got 30 leads in 2 hours. I need another graphic that hits on the same nerve. And so we were just constantly, and then we'd get reports back from Warren Parr, the ticket sales director, about, hey, how this batch of leads is doing this, or this batch of leads is doing that. Okay, we probably need to get a little more information on the page because they don't know what they're getting into. So the back and forth on that stuff was just unbelievable. And then Carl Pierberg and Susie Alvarez came into the picture and built out a whole data engine around it. And it was just magic. So to be able to work and see all those things, Neil, is, I don't even consider myself in digital anymore and content as much. There's a system to this where we're looking very much at how much reach and entertainment can we provide and attention can we have people spend with our content. We want our content team to push the best content they can, but then we're using paid ads to come behind and retarget and do all the intentional, like ticket sales or retail sales pieces. But we've got it basically as a 4-part engine, right? We've got to have the best content possible that goes out and just earns people's attention. Then we got to get the retargeting. We got to find the hand raisers who watched these videos for 10 seconds, who interacted with something, who came to our website, and then create all these and get as many of those people as possible. If the content's doing its work, we should have huge retargeting audiences, which we generally do. And then we push as hard as we can on the paid social side to use those retargeting audiences and drive them through the ticket sales funnel. And our ticket team is in love with it. So it's And then we look at like what are the conversion rates on the sales calls, and we keep tweaking products until we get it right.
Yeah, I mean, it truly is like understanding like why are we doing all this? Like the end goal is not to get a like. The end goal is not to get a share. There are end goals that you guys are should be focused on. And I think like we pay lip service oftentimes to, oh yeah, well of course the social and content team should be sharing insights with the sales and marketing team so that they can use that for paid social. But you don't see that play out in practice quite as
Yeah.
much as maybe you should. And maybe we're going to start to see that evolve a little bit more. But I think really when you think about like the fact that the content team and strategy and social and all of them understand why we're doing all this and who the audiences are and what the end goals are and how each department is working together. Like when you're thinking about starting a practice and when you're with a dream that is not maybe the size of a Chicago Bears or even the size of an AMBSE, and you're thinking about starting from scratch almost. Like how do you build it so that those goals do align across departments and that the content team knows why we're doing this and the marketing team knows everyone is working off the same set of objectives as opposed to being more focused and more siloed in, well, I'm going to kick ass and nail my engagement metrics or my reach metrics or my whatever metrics as opposed to really think about how it fits into the bigger picture. Like is there a magic to that, or is there a way to
Yeah.
really help that happen or in the structure or whatnot?
I think the biggest thing is you can't have a team if you don't have a common purpose. You can't have a team if so. One of the things we've talked about, like between ticket sales and marketing, is we're not we are absolutely driving ticket sales, but the bigger brand goal is to drive demand. And that's something both ticket sales and marketing can do, right? And so we're one of the things that we're trying to do, for instance, is we're trying to tear down, you just mentioned it. If the marketing team is only looking at this set of metrics and the sales team is only looking at this set of metrics, including conversion rates, then at some point, one of the things that I've seen over the years is you start to get finger pointing. Well, they didn't do enough of this and they didn't do enough of this. So we're trying to tear down all of those siloed metrics and start looking at the whole process from the time an ad goes out to the reaction of the people, to whether or not it got people to the site, what happened when they got to the site, to the conversion rate of the reps. And so we're actually have a project going with Microsoft. It's taken way longer than we thought it would, but Microsoft's been a phenomenal partner. But we're basically bringing all of our Ticketmaster data and all of our social, all of our marketing data into CRM essentially, and we're able to look at the whole process across from the time an ad goes out or any marketing effort goes out to what happened all the way through the process, so we can and now our ticket team is looking at the same set of metrics that our marketing team is, and when we get this thing built, so we should be having that finished here pretty quick. But that's the goal, is tear down those silos, have the same goals, have a common purpose, and get people in a room excited. When I got to those, I think one of the key things when I got to the Falcons was we did a couple things to make sure that everybody had the same goals. So we did it. We did a thing called Finding the Why, where it was an approach to content, and we made sure every content creator went through finding the why, and it had like 4 key factors. I can share that with you afterwards, but everybody had to have those same things. And the number one factor was be a people expert, not a platform or technology expert. Every one of our content producers, and that's, we still talk about this everywhere I go, this will be a part of it. To create consistently good content, you have to understand what moves people. And that is the magic of being consistently good in the content space. And so that we make all of our content producers responsible for what is happening, and we're looking at metrics not to be data geeks. We're looking at it to understand what's happening with people when they view our content, but they're all responsible for trying to build things that earn people's time and attention. So those kinds of things to ground the team and have common purpose and a common set of, we want to have as many creative differences in creative ideas, but we want them all going to the same place. We want them going to the same goals of how are we moving people. It's not, we're not producing content because I like it. We're producing it because we want these people. So we have to understand these people to like it, and we have to understand what moves them.
Yeah. Oh, it's just good stuff, man. I want to bounce back a little bit to that great insight and that epiphany like you have with the Bears around like the people that are coming to our website is different than people that we reach on social. And there was this paradigm shift that we don't talk about quite enough, that all of a sudden you had people that kind of accidentally got exposed to you, or by like discovered you as opposed to came to you, or searched on Google for you, or going to your website, and such an opportunity there. So thinking about this whole bigger picture thing, I want to frame this around like the how many different parallel pathways and different audiences can you really focus on when you're trying to think about sales marketing strategy, content strategy? Is there like, I mean, really, you can slice and dice cohorts all day, and there might be different pathways that are to come by. There might be different end goals and conversions for them. Like maybe someone could become a season ticket holder, maybe someone could become a merchandise buyer, but they live far away, so they're not going to come to a game tomorrow. Like, are there ultimately like different? Is there a heart of this is our main content foundation, or this is our main foundational principles versus this is how we're going to reach this audience, this is how we're going to reach this audience. Like how do you start to balance those two things when you have all these opportunities to learn so much about these individual cohorts of fans?
That is a great question. It depends on a lot of things, right? Where your team is in the journey of being, a content creating team and an engine, how many people you have, the time, and then, but the big thing is, how many big wins are there out there, right? How many of these efforts are worth, the time and energy that your team is going to put into them, have a big enough reward coming back. And I think that's, you can, if you're doing it right and you're generating revenue off of this stuff, you can continue to grow a team. The Falcons, we had a pretty big team, but UI UX, we had, I think, a more built out UI UX team than most of the other teams because we knew that the fan experience on a site and whether or not they converted was going to be very, very important. And we also had a big push behind an app. So that for us was a big deal, where some teams, hey, there's an NFL platform. We don't need that. The pages are basically built. We just can drop the content on, and that worked for them. But we've as we started to build up this app, that became very important. Same thing on the editorial side. We did not at that time feel like we had a massive avid fan base the way the Steelers or the Eagles or some of those did, and we needed to develop that more, and we felt like we had the roadway to do that, the path to do that. So we hired a Matt Tabik and an editorial team to really to fish in, and we did. We jumped from, I think, if I remember correctly, we jumped from number 25 in the league in article views per year to number 9, and just by having a really good editorial strategy. And that was probably the hardest effort we had. So I think I think when you sit down and just look at like, hey, where are the opportunities? If we can build the revenue strategy, you can do a number of them. But for us with the dream right now, we want to grow it, absolutely. But we know that our best fan converting engine is our games. So we want to produce that high end content that gets to as many people as possible, and then we want to have the performance marketing engine built to get them to games. And that's where we had a Hannah Chronic Spencer, who just went to U.S. Soccer, came in and did a phenomenal job of building that kind of performance marketing engine. And then we built out, hired Adam Bullock from a VP of ticket sales standpoint, who has just done an unbelievable job of kind of teaching the habits and the day-to-day work ethic of that team and all the minutia. It's just an unbelievable teacher. So those are our core components right now. But do we want to eventually expand it? Yeah, down the road at some point. But we know that we got to get more people to games, and we got to get the revenue engine going first.
I think that's obviously key, especially at an organization where you don't have like billion dollar media rights deals or whatever like an NFL does. So like I go ahead, Dan.
But we did. I mean, last year we sold out 12 of our 20 games and led the league in sellouts. And so like we know that we are starting to build, and we'll do even better this year. So we know that we know that right now we're building the right parts of the engine, but there is definitely some great areas that we can grow in future years.
And success compounds too. So like the more success you have, the more it'll be not easier, but the more you can do to drive even more success. So I love hearing like the focus on understanding what's moving the needle and knowing what those needles are that you're paying attention to, knowing what the scoreboard is. How do you start to think about balancing the stuff that may not show up until a year from now, 2 years from now, a generation from now, when it comes to understanding the effect of various, not just content, but programs and youth development programs and community outreach? Like, how do you balance those short-term, more tangible goals of this got this many leads, got this many sales, versus those longer-term, less tangible goals, I guess?
That's another great question. I'll put it this way. The short-term ones were easy. We knew that we had an awareness issue, and we had to get some of the content and digital marketing things in place. But great example of this is, you know, they did not have a CRM when Morgan took over this position, and so that was literally the first thing I did when I got here was I had to get us up and running on a CRM, and luckily we have a phenomenal partner in Microsoft who got us onto Dynamics, and so we've got that established. But now we got to grow the database, and ultimately, to your point, like there's all kinds of things that we could do. And one of the things that we absolutely want to get into is segmenting out that audience on the database and starting to do, more personalized marketing and get more relevant things in front of more relevant audiences and know exactly who we have in our database. But to be frank, like where the numbers were when we came in, we just needed to get people in the database. So right now our effort is to grow, grow the size of the database so that we have more people to reach out to and more fans in the system. But at some point we need to really segment this thing out. And that's why we're doing this other project with Microsoft is to get our Ticketmaster data in so we can see things like not only have they bought tickets, but have they been to the games and how many games they've been to over the years, and start to identify all those behavioral things as well as our marketing data. So social media numbers and all that stuff, we're trying to bring it all into one area so that we can start to build out some different, also who's buying retail, who isn't. We can start to segment this stuff out a little bit, but we're just like that has to be, a future year thing because we've got too many other foundational things we got to build right now.
We're gonna touch on a lot more, but I want to touch on something tactical real quick because I mentioned it. What are the most effective ways to convert social engagement, social traffic, social reach, I guess, to database, to first party data, to getting that fans in your database? Like we see, there are no secret of like no shortage of sweepstakes and promo codes and whatever it might be, and UTM codes when you're dropping links. Like what have you found throughout your career, and what do you think maybe could be next?
So there are I will say this, for us, it's very important that they are quality leads that are going into our database, that we're getting quality traffic. So we've done like some sweepstakes that generated unbelievable numbers in returns. But when we've tried to do any kind of outreach to that group, it has not worked at all because they just wanted to win a great prize.
Yeah.
And then we started to see it. Well, hey, we probably we just knew there was not a lot of great leads in those batches. So one of the things I think one of the things we're having the most success with, honestly, Neil, is like I said, generate as much attention and interest as we can with the social content and find those hand raisers, but then come behind it. And one of the best things that we've done is started to build out these like really great game experiences, right? So it's not just single game tickets. We're now building experiences around them. One of the ones the one that we've had the most success with right now is a product we created called Daughter Date Night. And it's, it has been a great seller for us. Now this is year 2. And when we create those retargeting audiences and find all those hand raisers and put this in front of them, it's magic in terms of the sales. And it's been something that we can really leverage, especially in games where we would otherwise have a hard time selling, and now all of a sudden we've got an experience that, who doesn't want to bring their kid to a game and let them watch the top pro sports team for women in Georgia. So we put in a t-shirt in there and they get a chance to take a picture on the court after the game. And all of a sudden it's who doesn't want to sign up for that? So I bought one for me and my daughters. And it's a lot of fun. So trying to think through like, it's always what is the value prop that is not going to just bring people into the database, but is actually going to get us people that come to that game. But then, the next year, Adam Bullock and team are calling those buyers and trying to see if they can buy a 5-game package or 10 or whatever. And so we talk a lot about what is the value that we're putting in front of people to make them take behaviors that we want. And I think experiences is one of them, but also, really, really attractive, 5-game and 10-game partial plans well, we have a lot of discussion about that. Our theme games, our half times, our giveaways, like all of those things, we're trying to like really build out. We have a matrix for every game, and it's like, okay, what is everything that's going into this game, and how do we make sure that every game is a very sellable game?
Yeah. No, I'm having like flashbacks now of the level of personalization of experiences. Like I remember when I was with the Coyotes in the NHL, and we had some games where we had like multiple different types of ticket promotions. Like it was spirituality night for some people getting a mini plan. It was also maybe like Boy Scouts like night at the same time, and like it was a personalized experience for those fans buying that into that group package or whatever that
Yeah.
promotion was. And we think about that. Like, is there a future where where content enters that picture as well, where like and maybe on the paid side for sure, we can target audiences a little more effectively. Where like I don't get the daddy daughter related content even, but you might because you have a daughter, and I don't have a daughter. Or is there still something like how do you balance that kind of I guess level of targeting with the more broader stuff like a halftime experience at a dream game or the big content piece that goes out to everybody that you want to go quote unquote viral? Or is that stuff meant to live kind of side by side? Yes, we need that top funnel stuff and it's alongside the more personalized middle funnel stuff.
Yeah, it's right. It's the it's that's the conversation that the segmenting piece, right? Is how do you identify those audiences? We hired a in year one we stopped using a media agency and hired a digital media professional. So we've Lindsay Hill on our team, who is absolutely fantastic, and we have a lot of conversations with her about like, okay, what do we know about what's in our in our database, for instance, and how do we start to find event goers in this thing? Right now we're promoting this Microsoft Xbox event for April 5th, and that was one of the discussions we had was like, how do we put a promotion for this event in front of the people that we know like to come out to similar things, whether that's camps and clinics, whether that's game attendees, whatever, anything else that we've done, and try to get the most relevant content in front of the most relevant audiences. But it's that's the magic that we're still trying to build a little bit, Neil. Is we are just because of where we started, we had to get some of the engine built first, and we're now and we do it the same thing on the paid social, right? I mean, that was the magic. That's why Facebook ads have been so good for so long, right? There's so many interests that or ways to segment in there and find relevant audiences. And honestly, I'm sometimes pushing the pedal towards like, let's get a little bit broader and let the algorithm in there figure out who's actually buying these things. But there's a ton of segmenting we can do on the paid social side too.
Yeah, and you think about like the sort of TikTok nature of we're going to put some content out there and the algorithm's going to find people that want that content and let them raise their hand, so to speak. And because I'm thinking about like almost like the chicken and egg of like maybe we put out some content that has whatever Ryan Howard and Asa Durr playing an NBA 2K game. I mean, now we know the people that watch 3/4 of that video, that's the right people to target for this Xbox event. Or it could have happened vice versa, where we have the Xbox event first, and then we create content to help identify those people that are good leads for it. And you can kind of work it from both ends, I guess.
Let's stick on that for a minute, because I think what you just said is really telling. That TikTok is probably, I think, in terms of social platforms, and I look at our team now as not just like, so I look at us as content across the board. Like, we have to be content producers, but TikTok probably changed the game more than anything since social media started, because it's the shift from who's following you to what topics are they interested to what topics are people interested in, right? I don't know the last time I had a video in my TikTok feed from somebody that I follow. It's
So,
it's all the topics that, right? You just get down these rabbit holes. And so, there's an opportunity there, because you can jump into whatever conversation you want. And if you bring the best content to that conversation, you can blow up overnight. And it's such a fascinating way to look at, the research and insights part of the creative process. It's a different model. And I actually kind of love it. I love the fact that, we can look at anything, and if we think, hey, our potential fans are over here, okay, we can get in front of them much quicker than trying to develop that audience over years, right? You can just jump right in. It's pretty fascinating.
I want to kind of use that as a jumping off point then for this next area of discovery of insight to think about like because I know something close to your heart is that ultimately we're entertainment. Sports is entertainment. We're an entertainment brand, and that's what's going to sell more. So like, how do you think about that living alongside the product, the basketball. It doesn't matter if someone knows the roster back in front to bottom, or does it matter if someone cares about what the box score said in a game? Is the X and O's or more basketball driven fan more valuable or just different in some ways versus the fan that is just a fan of the brand and maybe the content you guys put out. Like that's something that we're seeing a lot now as like when something comes across TikTok, you might not care who posted it. You just know that it's cool content, and you might not care that, or you might not even know the Landream are a basketball team, but they put out really good content that may
Yeah.
or may not be related to basketball. So how do you think about like the fan of the product versus the fan of the brand, and how those can marry together, or whether they always should?
Yeah, I mean, right. I think you can almost call everybody that's a fan right now is almost in the category of early adopter, right? And they have the reasons that they are fans, and they're our biggest advocates, and they're awesome, and the stories they tell are fantastic. The growth side of this thing is very open for us, but it's the people who what we're looking at, Neil. We did like a big market research piece when I first got here, and the whole thing was aimed at who are our potential fans, who are the people that are willing to basically either change allegiances or adopt an allegiance to our team, who is willing to come. And we looked at questions like, would you be willing to come to an Atlanta Dream game? And then really kind of dug into who those people were and what their interests were and what their background was and what other behaviors they're taking. And so, long story short, we got to get out to, we're kind of looking at this inside out strategy of the next group out from our current fans is, okay, who are the other basketball fans in Atlanta? And then I think the next ring out from there, and we have some really good data on this, is anybody involved in the youth athletic space. And so there's, everything that we're doing from an organization, even in the community, is like ratcheted up towards like, hey, we've got to have value to these audiences, and we got to like build out a value prop across the board. But to your point, yeah, now it's how do we get in front of those people with content as well, and that's where TikTok can start to let us, if we're doing it right, we can look at what are the conversations that those communities are into, and we can start to tailor content and get in front of them pretty quick.
And like there's even the aspect. I mean, like if you think about like your counterparts in the NBA, not necessarily just the Hawks, but the NBA in comparison to WNBA, where Adam Silver, the famous quote or whatever, is 99% of our fans will never come to a game. And
Yeah.
the WNBA is, the gate matters, and of course, driving ticket sales matters quite a bit, and having the fans of the team that want to come to games. But like as the W gets bigger and bigger, and there's more fans and it's getting bigger. Women's sports overall, women's basketball is getting bigger and bigger. So you might have a ton of fans who are in whatever in Kentucky now. They're watching highlights of Ryan Howard, and who may not be prospective ticket buyers at least anytime like tomorrow. And as you get more of this like larger fan base that may not be prospective ticket buyers, how do you think about the value of those fans, and how does that affect your how you allocate resources and strategy?
So I didn't answer your last question very well. You teed it up and I didn't swing at it. It's entertainment. And I think, I think we saw one of the biggest turnarounds in a sports team history last year. And I think there's a ton of learning there. It is what happened at Colorado when Deion Sanders went there. Yeah. They became an entertainment brand. And they became must-watch TV. They sold out their spring game. Their gear sales went up something like 90x over in 1 year. It's insane. And look at what happened to the other teams that got caught up in it too, because he's trading barbs with the head coach at Colorado State during their weekly pressers and getting into fights. So I mean, and arguing over which of their mothers raised them better. I mean, all of a sudden press conferences are becoming must-watch entertainment. And then you've got the Oregon coach basically just going off in his pregame speech about needing to beat them and talking at halftime about continuing to run the score up. I mean, it became must-watch TV, even though I don't even think they ended with a winning record, but it just, the way that, and not everybody can have a Deion Sanders, but the takeaway of the importance of viewing ourselves as an entertainment brand and to drive interest. And you don't have to do it the same way that Deion Sanders did it. But the general takeaway is we've got to be interesting. We've got to be entertaining. If you're going to reach a broader audience of people, and I'm going to use Atlanta for a second. This has got to be the most competitive sports market anywhere. I
Oh,
mean, what other market has a college football team that gets NFL type TV ratings,
yeah.
a Major League Baseball team that probably has the most casual fans of any of the teams in the market and the most overall kind of backing, and they just won a World Series not long ago, an NFL team, an NBA team that sells out most of their games, one of the top two or three most popular MLS teams,
Yeah.
and a WNBA team. Like it, so to the competition for people's time, attention, dollars, and interest is ridiculous. There's no other market like that. So what I'm I just don't think boring is an option. And I think and I think you look at the growth of women's sports, it is fantastic. But the personalities now, there's a lot of conversation about we know more of the players now in women on the women's side than on the men's college space.
Totally.
And part of that, I mean, Caitlin Clark is there's an entertainment factor there. She gets the crowd going. She's talking to the crowd. And you go back to the biggest moment of last year's national championship game, which was a massive TV draw. The biggest moment is that viral moment between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark with the pointing to the ring finger. Like that. Here's the blueprint. It's right there in front of us. We've got to do things. Now, again, we don't have to do it and be snarky all the time. We don't have to do it in a mean-spirited way, but we do have to be entertaining. I believe that wholly. We have to be to broaden an audience. We've got to bring entertainment value.
Does that broader reach of entertainment like change the equation though? For what you spend a lot of your time probably thinking about how are we going to fill the building for this game, for this game, for this game, and drive new ticket sales leads. Does the broader fan base that you may reach, like whatever, let's say Paige Becker somehow ends up in Atlanta, and now you have a ton of fans in the Northeast. Like do you think about how do you monetize those fans versus the local fans? Do you have to think about, well, this might get millions of views on TikTok or Reels, but we should be spending this time instead on this more localized thing because that's going to drive more ticket sales revenue? Or do you have to compare the revenue potential of each of those areas?
Yeah, it has to be reasonable, right? We can't bite off more than we can chew. And so we do try to, we think we have to win Atlanta first. Now, the exception to that is there's a really strong contingent, as you can imagine, of South Carolina players in the WNBA, including one or two on our team. But when we play an Asia Wilson, right? Or we play Indiana, who has Aaliyah Boston, like we know that, hey, a couple hours away, Columbia, South Carolina, they have a massive following. And so we can do some marketing there and win those fans over. Matter of fact, Don Staley is one of our season ticket members. Crazy. It's awesome. It's awesome.
Got a legend in the database.
Yeah. So yeah, there's it has, and we get fans. We get a lot of ticket buyers unbelievably from Florida, Alabama, South Carolina, and so at Tennessee. So we do, we're not like going up and doing activations there. Like we can't do that kind of stuff right now. But if Ryan Howard has something in Tennessee or Kentucky, we'll send a photographer, we'll send a videographer or photographer and get content of those things. She's done like street signings and stuff like that. So yeah, but it has to be within reason, and we feel like we've got to start by winning Atlanta, and we work very, very hard at that. But that also goes right into our game experience, which I think is honestly it's I don't know if I want to say this on this podcast, but I think it's the most fun game experience in Atlanta. It is. I'll put it that way. I think it is, and the Falcons do a fantastic job, and every team here does. And the Hawks are phenomenal. But our games are a lot of fun. Like our fans, no matter what the score is, when the DJ cuts the music, they're still singing, and it's amazing. It's just amazing. It is so much fun, and I've never been to games and just had so much fun, whether or not the team was winning. And trust me, when it's a tight game and we're winning, they are as loud as it gets. But even in games where we may not be winning, the crowd's still having a great time, and it's just a great atmosphere.
Hell yeah. How do you because I come from an NHL background. I used to tell people all the time, like, go to a game, it's a whole different experience. Or I went to an LAFC game and I would tell people all the time, like, yeah, you gotta go. You have to go to experience it. How do you actually bring that to fans that don't know? How do you leverage social media? How do you leverage paid social? How do you leverage content? Like, yes, you can show some videos, I guess, of what's going on at the games, but you want to drive word of mouth, you want to drive real. Like, is there a magic way to convey that here's what you're missing about this magical experience at games?
We've we do it any way that we can. We obviously try to put a lot of clips out, but one of the things we do is try to amplify also when because our fans do a great job of talking about it when on Twitter especially, but on all the platforms, but just amplifying and kind of getting like making sure that that third party validation is getting a little more air cover and getting more eyeballs on it. And we have done billboards where we've used we've used the social comments of fans in the arena and put them on billboards, right? To kind of like illustrate, like, don't take it from us. Like, it's unbelievable in there. And like I said, it is just so much fun. And so we know that that's also driving talk value for us. And that's, it's driving great word of mouth marketing for us.
Yeah, we've seen some of those strategies as well with like having super fans or influencers that have platforms so they can share with their audiences. Oh my God, this is awesome! Like on their Instagram stories or whatever. So there's definitely, I think more people are starting to take that seriously. Of like, how do we make sure this is getting out there because you're missing out on something and the product is awesome.
Yeah, we've done the exact same thing. Influencers that can, they're event influencers or just kind of lifestyle in Atlanta, and those have done really well for us too.
One more thing before you get to the shareable stat, I promise. We've gone way over time, but there's. I'm looking at my notes. I'm like, well, this has just been awesome. I want to talk kind of more globally about just the nature of the growth of women's sports, but also like what that means for you guys when it comes to content strategy, when it comes to fan experience. And what I've noticed, going to like a San Diego Wave game is it's pretty normal to have all the players like stay afterwards and sign autographs, taking pictures on the field. And you see other folks where the content just seems like the players are more into it, more cooperative, and it's less like walking on eggshells. And coming from NFL background yourself, like you can probably notice a little bit of a difference there, and I'm sure it's different across teams as well, of course, and different players. But like, what have you seen at? I guess let's start with more of the micro of just the ability to work with the players and have them be more cooperative and have them understand that we're part of this growth story. That like if we participate, it's going to raise all of our boats.
We don't really have to have a ton of conversation. Like our basketball side is great, and we work hand in hand with them. And you're absolutely right. Like they do a great job of making the players do a great job of making themselves accessible. And we'll put in requests, but they're fantastic about it. And so I've seen a couple of just magic moments since I've been doing this. As I mentioned, we do this daughter date night thing, and after the game, they get the parents and the kids get to come down and take pictures on our court, and it's a really cool thing. Well, this family came all decked out in Michigan gear for one of the games. Well, Naz Hillman, who is the all-time leading rebounder at Michigan, sees them, runs over, and takes a picture with the family at midcourt. It's just, and then talks to the kid afterwards. It's like magic. And we also do another experience called My First Dream Game, and you the first 50 buyers get to come down and into the lower stands and sit with a player after the game and basically meet a player. I mean, there's just stuff like that is it's just fantastic. It really is. And the players a lot of them will linger around and meet with people and talk to them after the game. And it's really cool.
Yeah, and when you see the like a player that gets it, and you see the fan like something that's important and close to my heart is like how are we creating super fans? How are we creating a fan that's going to have a story for life that they're going to tell everybody, and that fan becomes an evangelist? And like yes, all fans are great. We want everyone in the building is important, but if we can create more super fans, like one a day even, like that's going to just snowball and have such a great effect.
The greatest thing to watch is the look on the kids' faces when they meet the players. It is just it's why you do it, right? I mean, it's magic. So, I mean, we didn't even, we've talked a ton about digital, but my biggest driver now is, and I'm using all the same processes that are in play. The biggest driver is fan growth, like any way, shape, or form. And that's so I technically oversee our marketing, our ticket sales, and our fan experience. But I work very closely, we have a great community team as well, work very closely with corporate partnerships as well. And everything for me is through the lens of like what is creating new fans, and that's that's the partnerships that we do. That's the types of community activations or partnerships. It's the content pieces. And our best, like I said, fan driver is getting them to that first game. So it becomes our number one metric is that. So the number I look at closest now is not a digital metric. It's how many buyers did we have? Yeah, how many, especially first time buyers. So I'm constantly obsessing, but it's the same exact process to start with the research and the insights, what's going to move people. It's how many fans can we make? And those, we have these things called in fan experiences after game or before or after games, but it's like things like going down on the court to take pictures. We have a fan tunnel where they can basically give the players five as they're coming out onto the court. There's one where they get it, I mentioned the meet and greet. So we have a whole bunch of those things. And it's really trying to create that look, to what your point of like creating that magic that makes somebody a fan, and try to get thousands of people walking out of there for 20 games, all with a giant smile on their face. And my first year, I spent every game, I would kind of position myself in an area where I could just watch everybody walk out of the arena, and I was just gauging whether or not they all had smiles on their faces, and most of the time they did. And that was just because funny, because like Morgan and I would, in those early days, would call each other after every game. And Morgan every once in a while would be like, "Oh man, the parking lot thing, was jammed, or this thing didn't go right." And I'm like, "Morgan, everybody I saw walked out of the arena with a smile. We just won the night. Whatever the score was, we just won because everybody I saw walked out with a smile on their face, and they didn't notice the things that we can get better at next time. They didn't even notice it."
I love how we're like we're coming full circle here, kind of understanding the ultimate central goals that everyone can align to. We're in the business of creating fans, and then also kind of like the people talking about this, going back to the Chicago Bears Facebook page, like and how many people are talking about this, even if we're not tracking it, because there's dark social or conversations in the car afterwards, or conversations at the water cooler the next day. Like it all goes back together, and all comes. Things change, but also things stay the same as well.
So it's funny you say that. The very first presentation that Morgan and I did when we were trying to basically overhaul the digital strategy with the Falcons, we had a slide, and I mentioned it before, the creative process. And it's a 5-step process. Number one is research. Number two is pull insights from the data. Number three is brainstorming, and then it's production and distribution. But I really I labeled it as creative process, and I was trying to roll out to everybody, this is gonna be our creative process. And over the years, I kept coming. I didn't intend for this to happen, but I kept coming back to that slide, and I still do. It's in every one of my presentations to any group, because it's for me now. It's a great creative process, but it's way more than that. It is an actual mindset shift that I think go back to the way I was saying, like a lot of like the creative agencies operated, right? Their process was always, what is our brand messaging? What is our product differentiation? Da, 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 da. Me. Okay, now produce something. And I'm like, we got to flip this. Yeah. Everything we do is about insights and influence. We have got to understand people and influence them and motivate them, or get them to move, take the next step in the fan journey. And so that creative process, I have in every deck that I do, because I'm always trying to keep coming back to that. Everything starts with what moves people emotionally and how do we produce it? And it's more than just a digital creative process. That is, I think, the way the marketing works now. There's so many things now, Neil, as you know, such a fragmented landscape. You can't get reach easily anymore, right? Like when you and I were doing Facebook back in like 2010, 2011, we didn't even hear about the algorithm, right? The algorithm. We posted and assumed everybody saw it. Now we have posts that don't even reach 800 people, or even less than. It's so like their reach has become far harder to attain and much more expensive than it used to be. And so the only way to break through that is to do things that move people and get them to talk about it with others. And that is the marketing landscape, not just in content, not just in digital. There's so many things now competing for people's attention. And we're seeing that right at the youth level. The number of things that they're interested in now compared to 30 years ago, is like it was everybody. You were either an NFL or a Major League Baseball or an NBA fan. Almost every kid in my school back then. That's not the case anymore. There's so many other things for people to be interested in now. Reach has gotten the interests have splintered as the entertainment and media landscape has splintered. And so you're now in a competition for people's attention, and you've got to do things that they earn their attention better than everybody else. And that's not just in digital and content. That's marketing across the board. That's in fan experience. To be frank, as I just mentioned with Atlanta, we have to be the best. There's so many options. So I go back to that slide all the time, and it's everything we do should be starting with research and insights and asking better questions instead of, what is our message? We need to start with why will they care? Why are people going to be interested? Start there. That's a much better question to ask if you want to build something that's going to move people. And that is, so to me, like those are kind of like the fundamental things that if you can get everybody bought in on those things, all of a sudden you're going to have a group of people who are going to be highly motivated to come into work every day and try to do something better and build on each other's ideas if that's the ground floor. So I will stop rambling, but that is
Okay.
I obviously love this piece.
No, that paradigm shift. I was grinning so widely because I like took the words out of my mouth. I was gonna restate that the same way of like really flipping it of what do we want them to care, what do we want them to hear or see, as opposed to why they're gonna care about what we have to say in the first place. Just so good.
1,000%.
Well, Dan, we're gonna have some more fun with our catch and shoot segment. The bar has been raised high, the hoop is very high, but we're gonna have some fun. So stick around with this episode. Share with that. Coming up right now. Just awesome stuff from Dan Gadd, SVP of Growth for the Atlanta Dream. I hope you were taking notes. I sure was. Just tremendous stuff. Lots of good insight and wisdom and pragmatic tips that will stick with me really for the rest of my career, the rest of my life. Stick around for more fun with Dan coming up in our next segment. Just more good lessons and stories. We hear about his crazy experience in the 28-3 Falcons-Patriots Super Bowl, that infamous game. We hear about the biggest failure, one of the biggest failures of Dan's career, as he will tell us, and the lessons he took away from it. Just lots more good stuff coming up with Dan. Stick around for that segment. First, this episode's Shareable Stat. This episode's Shareable Stat comes from the Sports Business Journal on a recent panel talking about fan experience and fan trends and how they engage with teams. And that stat was shared, said that 40% of sports event ticket purchases by Gen Z occur in the last 7 days leading up to the event. So 40% of all ticket purchases by Gen Z occur within 7 days of the event taking place. So what does that mean? What can you do with that information? Well, going back to some of the stuff that we talked about with Dan in the interview, how we're constantly competing for attention. In this case, it's not just overall mind space and heart space, but attention within a given 7-day period. What is Gen Z? What are they doing this weekend? Not making plans well in advance to go to a game, especially compared to Gen X and other generations that do have a little more advanced planning when it comes to attending a sports event. So 7 days. What we also talked about with Dan, which comes up, I think, with this stat, is the ability to make each game kind of feel like something special, an event. It's easy to get monotonous, especially if you're in a sport like baseball with 81 home games throughout the season. But how can you make every game feel like it has something that is attractive, something that's appealing, something that makes it different from the other games to make it more worthwhile to come out, whether that's promotion, giveaway, theme. We see some of that play out all the time, and it's another opportunity to really win that fan over when they are thinking about what do they want to do this weekend. Because as the shareable stat shows, 40% of those sports event ticket purchases by Gen Z occur, again, in the last 7 days leading up to the event. So that's a shareable stat. Think about it, talk about it, ponder it, take action on it, but more importantly, stick around for more great stuff from Dan Gadd. Right back from this episode of Shareable Stat, and I'm joined once again by Dan Gadd. He is the SVP of Growth for the Atlanta Dream. Dan, just a phenomenal interview. You nailed it. Are you now ready for a little catch and shoot?
I am absolutely ready. Let's go.
All right, let's see if you can knock down shots like Caitlin Clark or something. All right. Number one, tell me the non-sports organization that was the most memorable to work with during your time at Taylor. You may have touched on this already, but let's see.
Easy one, Tide. Just phenomenal partnership there. I still talk to who was our client at the time, Ann Candido, a lot. She now runs her own agency. She's fantastic, and it was just a great partnership, and we got to do a lot of really awesome stuff while we were there.
Yeah, I remember the Our Colors campaign that you alluded to earlier, and even seeing, I think it was maybe a few years ago that P&G maybe it was P&G, like it was like that. Are you a tie dad in the Super Bowl? Like, or this is a tie dad? Like that was a really clever thing as well. So the culture is strong there for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, number two. Tell me, this is a good one. You've been manager of people at a lot of places. So tell me your number one tip for someone leading a team or being a manager of people.
I think if you're transitioning into being a leader, the biggest thing, and I talk about this with our team a lot, is you've got to transition from being a high achiever yourself to getting the most out of people. And that means creating the environment, creating the culture. That means, quite honestly, it's building a team of people who trust each other enough to share ideas and creating an environment where even the quiet voices are sharing ideas, and you're giving them the platform to bring in ideas, because I think I think some of the absolute best creatives are the quietest ones. And so how you're managing that team and building the environment where they feel comfortable sharing, or you're creating mechanisms so that they do share, is and again, the biggest thing is how effective and what kind of output can you get from the team. And that's a big transition from being the individual, but it's also where, quite honestly, you're going to get the most pride. It's to see the other people go on and excel at other places is and I cannot tell you how exciting it is to watch where a lot of the people I've worked with have landed over the years. It's just so cool to watch it happen. So that's the transition.
Oh yeah, I think that's a great one. I mean, hell, you alluded to earlier that team you had at AMBSE, I just all stars, and your family tree is quite strong, man.
That was a absolutely great team to work with.
Hell yeah. Number three. Let's give you a fun one too. Tell me the most memorable player to work that you got to work with during your NFL tenure, and also the most memorable piece of content from your time in the NFL.
All right, most memorable player. I think just one of the best human beings. And I didn't get to work with him a ton because we weren't doing a lot with the players, but and there's been a lot of good ones. It's tough to. I don't want to feel like I'm leaving people out, but Fred Taylor with the Jaguars was just a phenomenal human. My wife still has a Fred Taylor jersey. Like I think any longtime Jaguars fan has a real special place in their heart for Fred Taylor, and there's a good reason for it. In terms of most memorable piece of content. Oh man, Neil, you're making me choose between my babies here. I'll tell you one that has a special place in my heart. I just heard Kyle Ben Zion mention the Hayden Hurst piece. That was a great one. In terms of impactful storytelling, that was a great one. I'm going to go a slightly different direction though. I think when we came into AMBSC, we came in with the Falcons. We were making a pretty big 180 turn on the content side, and I think just naturally you're doing something that's very very different. So there's going to be skeptics on whether or not this works or not. And we're going into the playoffs, and we had a brainstorm, and we came up with this equity that we did this kind of creative exercise and came up with this equity called In Brotherhood, and wrote it. We and edited thing out, and we released it, and that thing just went absolutely bonkers, and it was the most amazing thing. We released it before the divisional round against Seattle, if I remember correctly, and I can remember the next several days driving to work, and all of the radio stations in Atlanta were ripping the audio and just playing it over the radio, and I could not believe it. And all of a sudden we turned the guy that was the host of that, Derek Moore. All of a sudden he's on TV and radio all over the place. He becomes like an overnight sensation, and we ended up doing a whole bunch of other videos with him. But the fact that showed what it could be, right? That when that thing blew up and it became, and honestly, it was unbelievable what happened. In Brotherhood is on the NFC Championship rings from that year. It was over the locker room in the Super Bowl. It was on the billboards, and when we came into Houston, like that was not planned as a playoff campaign. That was just a singular video that just exploded, and that just showed what the potential was of that team. We hadn't had one of those yet that went like that, and it was just such a it's just natural that there's going to be a lot of people like, hey, they've hired all these new people and they're talking crazy and doing all this new stuff, and they're operating differently than we've ever seen digital operate here, and to have that thing take off the way that it did, and just kind of like hey, look, it validated the approach. And so for that reason, and it was the first of many great things that team did. So it just kind of, I think it got a lot of buy-in, even probably from some of the people that were on that team at the time and didn't know what we could be. I think that was an important part of that team gelling and becoming what it did.
Love hearing that. I'll tell you, it's so powerful. There's nothing better than when the message that's being sent in the locker room among the players is echoing what's going out on social media and vice versa. Like that kind of synergy is just when you get it, it's amazing.
I will say one of the most, maybe one of the absolute, maybe the coolest thing there's been a lot of great moments, but when I picked up the NFC Championship ring and looked at it, and I had no idea they were putting that on the NFC Championship ring. It's big letters on the side in Brotherhood. I was like, oh my Lord, a digital video that our group produced became such a part of this team that it's on the NFC Championship ring. That was just so far outside of the realm of anything I thought would be possible. It just for that, and like I said, it just the way that I think that put a bounce in everybody's steps in terms of like what we could do there, and that was awesome.
Oh man, I got goosebumps. All right, we're gonna go into a different memory here. Number four for you, Dan. Tell me what was 28-3 like, and what did you end up taking away from it?
I'm going to get murdered for this, and I know the people that are going to murder me for it. I'm going to tell you something that is going to be unexpected for you. So that was my second Super Bowl loss. And 10 years before that, I had gotten hired midseason by the Bears, and we lost to the Colts in the Devin Hester return game, and then it rained the whole game. And that was a miserable experience. It was that whole franchise was just devastated, and that was hard. This is going to sound so stupid, Neil, and I might get eaten alive for this. I have a much more favorable memory of 28-3 because at least for 3 quarters, I was sitting there going, "We're going to win a Super Bowl." I felt like I've said this before, and that the team that I was a part of ate me alive for it. So I know I'm going to get a lot of comments about this, but I still stand by that. The feeling in that game was very different than the Bears Colts Super Bowl, which it felt like that one was going sideways most of the game, and then it kind of did at the end. I remember in Houston sitting there going, and this is a funny part. When that game ended, I had 4 tabs open on my browser. Mm-hmm. One was the win graphic that Shay Rim had produced, our digital graphic designer, and I had to close that one out. The next one was the parade route in Atlanta. Gosh. I had to close that one out. The next tab was the Super Bowl champion merch sale page. Oh, and then the last one was the article announcing that the Falcons had won their first ever Super Bowl. And I had to rewrite the entire article because our writer was down on the field to cover the celebration. Oh, no. I had to rewrite. I was furiously typing the entire fourth quarter because the score kept changing, and our writer left and said, "Hey, everything's in there. You just need to probably change out the score and any final stats." And when I say typed furiously for the entire fourth quarter, because I had to keep changing almost every paragraph, and I had to keep basically detailing how at the time I was writing, the Falcons staved off a comeback attempt, right? And then I'm like, and at a certain point you're going, "Oh, damn it. I may need to rewrite the whole lead. I may need to rewrite the whole headline. Like I probably need to start creatively thinking about how to position this." And it felt like every play in the fourth quarter, I was having to rewrite and type something else in there. And I'm like, this is not good. But so that's my other memory. And then I did also remember I had a text chain with a bunch of mostly college friends, and they were joking like in the third quarter, like, "Don't blow this, Gadd," basically. And then all of a sudden, like, ding, ding, like it just started picking up pace. And by the end, I just had to put my phone off to the side because they were just going, just ham on me. So it was, but it obviously a brutal end of that game. And, but there's no doubt about it. That was a cool experience, even the way that it ended, where sitting in the Miami game, the Bears versus Colts, we were literally under an overhang. We had an auxiliary press box, so like when the wind blew, it was bringing like water on back onto me and our writer, and it was like getting on our laptop. And I can remember like trying to like hover over the laptop because I thought it was going to fry with the water coming on it. And so so in terms of if I had to pick one of those two Super Bowls to relive, it would definitely be the Falcons Patriots one.
Oh man, just picturing you in the press box having to rewrite that article under stress, like I had to take a year off your life. That's wild.
Kyle Ben Zion does not share the same opinion of that Super Bowl that I do, so I know he's going to be one of them. I'm probably going to hear it from Hiddle. I'm going to hear. I know. There's a couple others that are going to rake into me over that one.
Next question, we're gonna shift to a wholly positive thing. Tell me the most memorable game for positive reasons from your entire
Yeah.
sports career.
That I worked or that I was a fan at.
Let's do one of each maybe if you have one.
Yeah. Um, I mean, that's another hard question because there's been so many. But I'd say, I'll say the very first game with the Dream was a magical game. And I've had a lot of really fun ones, but that game, because we threw an organization together, like I said, there was 8 people, and we hired Hannah Chronic Spencer, our marketing director, like a month, 6 weeks before that game. And we went from, there's an unbelievable backstory. I won't get into the whole thing, but we basically went from only 500 tickets sold to sold out in a couple weeks. And there was a mad dash to make that happen. And so to get it sold out the night before the game and walk into the arena and have successfully gotten that game sold out. And then the game was just unbelievable. And the fans, we really didn't know. Most of us were new, and this was the first sellout that the organization had a long time. So we really didn't know what to expect, and they hadn't really been in a full building in that arena. So we really didn't know what it was going to be like, and it was the most fun. Like the crowd was just singing and dancing and just having a great time. And it came down to the final shot of the game, and the LA Sparks missed a shot, and Cheyenne Parker rebounded it, and the whole arena erupted. And there were a lot of things that kind of went crazy that day in terms of parking entrances and gates and things that seats weren't numbered and down on the court side of that. There was a lot of things that we needed to get better at, but it was absolute magic in the arena. And I'll never forget this. The DJ played Candy Rain, the old 90s song, and stopped when play resumed. And I'm not making this up. Our crowd, the entire arena kept singing it for like another minute. And myself and Hannah were standing up there, and we just got goosebumps and looked at each other like, whoa, I'd never seen anything that cool. And just the way the game ended. So to have thrown that team together the way that we did, I'd just gotten there in February. This game was in May. So, I mean, I had only been there a couple months. And for that game to get sold out, to have the magic that we did in that arena that night, and for it to end the way that it did and all those special things, that game was one of the coolest things I've ever walked out of. And it just like such a feel of accomplishment with a group of people that was pretty awesome.
That's a hell of a way to start your first season with the team and know that you guys got something there. That's awesome to hear, man.
Absolutely.
Next one for you. You can take this any direction you want. Tell me, I give you a magic wand in pursuit of the dreams on and off court goals. Off court goals, I guess we'll focus on mostly. What do you use it for? From like a strategy or solutions perspective, whether it's something you can track or something you can make happen. Like, what are you using that magic wand for to really just help the dream, go over the top or help you guide strategy?
I'll say this. Let's go back to the Deion Sanders example. Lightning in a bottle on the entertainment side, something that and that's something we'll build towards, right? We have a chance to have a really good personality on social, but I think we've done such a great job of scaling this thing up, but to have something that just goes electric and changes the dynamic of the way everybody sees it in one fell swoop if I had a magic wand, that would make fan growth a lot easier. But I do also love the sweat equity that we've put into building this thing brick by brick and doing a excellent job of growing the fan base over the last 2+ years, and building the foundation for us to keep scaling this thing. Like the amazing thing is we look at like the ticket sales projections. We're very, very confident. We're one of the top teams in the league in ticket sales revenue growth year over year, and we're looking at we know that we can sustain this for years to come, just based on we can continue to scale up on the marketing side and drive leads. And we know that we can continue to build the call volume on the ticket sales team underneath Adam Bullock. And we know that we have unbelievable conversion rates right now. Like the team is killing it. And so everybody working hand in hand. So yeah, I'd love to have a Deion Sanders type, entertainment inflex, is that the right word? Infusion that changes everything. But I'm not panicking about it. We've got a good marketing team. We've got a good content team. We've got a good ticket sales team, and we can continue to grow this thing. And we've got excellent partners on the partnership side too. That great teammates. So I that's another plug I need to put in here. I think one of the best things that's happened with the Dream, Neil, is this leadership team is so much fun to work with in terms of, and that's not a knock on any other place. It's just this group is just fantastic at getting in a room and talking through, potential challenges or solves for them and coming out with an aligned POV on how to move forward as an organization. I really have a ton of fun with that.
Love hearing that. And yeah, it's got to be so gratifying to know that yes, a magic wand is great and all, but to be able to step back and be like, what we're doing, we know where we're headed, and we know we're gonna get there, and we know what we're doing is working, and like that's just got to make you sleep better at night. I love
Yep.
hearing that. All right, next one for you, Dan. I love the food questions. I always ask a food question. Number 8, tell me the best meal to get in Atlanta and where to get it.
Okay. Man, there are Atlanta is fantastic with food. There are so many things that you can get here. But I will say a couple of my favorites are I gotta give you one. I'll tell you what. There's a place called Kimball House that has fantastic food, steaks or whatever you want. But they built the entire decor for 2 drinks. I think it's their old fashioned and the Sazerac. So if you want to have a meal and a cocktail, that place is absolutely off the charts. It's the best old fashioned I've had in Atlanta.
I like it. It sounds good to me, man. And I realize now I skipped the question, so we're gonna go back to one.
Okay.
We're gonna go back to number 7 here. This is something that you and I actually talked about offline a little bit. So I might have had it in the back of my head somehow. Tell me what's something significant you had your mind changed about recently, or something new and novel that you've learned recently. So either something you had your mind changed about, or something that was just really new and novel that you had recently.
I'm gonna change it up slightly. I'm gonna go back to an old one. I'm gonna go to because this is something that has stuck with me. I mentioned earlier like that the dean at the college is a big moment and thinking a certain way. I'm going to date myself here a little bit, but I got a really valuable lesson out of a failure. When I was in Jacksonville, they used to have a thing called the NFL Business Summit. And I had flown out that year and I'd gotten enamored with a presentation that happened at the NFL Business Summit. There was a group presenting, and again, I'm going to date myself, but it was basically like accessories for, at the time, cell phones, like ringtones and stuff like that. Remember when those were big?
Oh yeah.
And I got blown away by the projections they had in there. They're like, oh, it's going to be a $9 billion industry and da 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 da. So I come back from the business summit and I'm hooked. So I go running around our organization. I'm like, we got to do this. We got to do this. We got to do this. So we sign up for this thing, and we're going to build now wallpapers and ringtones and all that. We're doing a trivia contest and all this stuff for cell phones. And I'm back then I'm shooting and editing, so I'm producing like TV commercials, radio spots. Like I'm going all in to try and promote this thing. I've got the hosts of our radio shows like doing their snarky, one-liners I mean, on and on and on. And this thing rolls out, and I'm like, we're gonna blow this thing up. And the group from this company is, and they had done a deal, I believe, with the Jets as well. And they're saying all these numbers that we're gonna hit. And we go in. So our basically our CMO, our IT director, our webmaster, and I think maybe one other person are having a meeting one day, and the organization has put up airfare, hotel, and tickets to the Super Bowl. 2 Super Bowl all paid packages for this trivia contest. Okay, so we're going to give away 2 of these things for the top 2 winners. So in this meeting, our CMO turns to our webmaster and goes, "How many how many people do we have playing the trivia contest? And he looks up and goes, 4. And you could just hear the air go out of the room.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, I'm going to get fired. And our CMO goes, "You're telling me there's a 50% chance you're winning the Super Bowl package if you're in the contest?" So we have another meeting, and this time the vendor flies down, and we're in this radio studio, and they're touting all these revenue projections and all these numbers that we're going to hit, and our CMO goes, "How are you guys coming up with these projections? Like, what's the math on this?" And they go, "Well, based on, well, we've worked with the Jets, and so based on a million listeners per radio show, and this, that, and then." Our CMO goes, "Wait, hold on. We don't have a million listeners on the radio shows. Well, how many do you have?" And I'm like, I'm already doing the math because at this time I think there's only 800,000 people in all of Jacksonville, and I'm like, uh-oh. And they go, I think he said 40,000. And again, I'm like,
Oh my goodness.
oh. And so long story short, one of the things that really kind of stuck with me from that was like, you don't have, I think it's great to be innovative, but don't be ahead of your audience.
Yeah.
Don't be ahead of your audience. Like, do the things that they're interested in and that are going to move them. Again, it comes back to insights and influence, right? Don't do things that your audience isn't ready for. You don't want to be the educator. That you don't want to be the first to die on the sword on that. It's so, and that thing did not get better as the season went on, and it was like, oh man, we just got out over our skis here. So that was something that kind of I'm always thinking through. Is like, I want to make sure that we're doing things that are right in line with what our fans are interested in.
Well, I'm glad it was a great learning experience, and you lived to tell the tale. So it ultimately, we'll take it as a positive hit.
Those were some dark days, man.
All right, next question for Dan, coming down the wire here with Dan Gadd of the Atlanta Dream. Tell me excluding anyone that you've worked for, tell me the sports team or brand or general brand, whose social digital strategy that you most admire right now, and why.
Okay, I'm gonna again tweak this slightly, but I'll put it this way, Neil. I'm kind of like TikTok. I'm not so much following people or accounts. I'm looking at the great content that's out there. I scout. I try to be curious and look at everything in terms of the numbers that it's doing and try to figure out why. And that can come from, there's so many great sources. And I try to like always try and pull the insights out of what is moving the things that are moving. But I will say, I still think the blueprint. If you're a sports brand, I don't know if anybody's ever done it better than what Red Bull was doing in like 2012, 2013, 2014. And they still do a good job. But the fact that they produce content, I'm a huge believer in the impact of great content. And Red Bull made themselves a part of the action sports culture because of their content. And I just like, it's tough to beat that, right? They made their logo a symbol of a culture.
Yeah.
It was something that people wanted to wear on their jackets, on their shirts, and it's just like, just because of that was just amazing to watch happen. I remember there was a quote, and I used to use this in decks all the time. They said something to the effect of like, "We don't want to be the ad, we want to be the show." And I'm like, that right there is the mentality, right? They just produced better content than anybody else in that space, and they became part of the culture, right? That's the blueprint.
That's perfect. I mean, you talk about like flipping a paradigm on its head. Like, they were an entertainment and marketing brand first, and then their product happened to be an energy drink. Like, they could be selling anything, and the fact that they got people to fall in love with their brand and their content gave them any opportunity available to them. I love that. I still remember the skydive from space or whatever, Felix, whatever his name was. Just an example among others.
Unbelievable, right?
Last one for you, Dan. Tell me the player on the Dream, or actually, we can go two ways of this. Either the player on the Dream whose name we should all know heading into the season for on-court reasons, and if different, a player that we should know the name for off-court reasons.
I'll stay on court. Ryan Howard is our most player. Rookie of the Year in 2022, first overall pick that year. Great player, set a league playoff scoring record against Dallas this past season. The one that I love to watch, and I just think is such a difference maker on our team as well. Probably doesn't get quite as much attention as Ryan, is Alicia Gray. She is, I think, just been so clutch, and quite honestly, I think she's a fantastic complement to Ryan Howard. So I have a ton of fun watching Alicia Gray play. I think she's kind of like a pro's pro. She's fantastic.
That is a great call out. I mean, yeah, Ryan Howard's amazing. I'll have to also keep an eye on Alicia Gray among the other players in her roster as well this season.
And there's obviously other great ones on there too, but
Hell yeah.
I have a lot of fun. I think she's great.
Danny kicked ass in your catch and shoot. Lots of swishes. I mean, somehow it blew me away even more than I anticipated in that segment. Now, your chance to take over the podcast and tell us your social media all-star follow. Just tell us who they are, whatever platform they're on, and why they're following.
I'm going to tell you another out of the box one here.
Yeah.
I think, and he's not necessarily super active on platforms. Just one of the wisest people I know, and I reach out to him, sparingly because I try not to wear him out. But Jackson Janayagam, who was the leader at Taylor, he's just got like an unbelievable demeanor to him and common sense and wisdom and anytime I'm in a tough spot or I need to have somebody look at something a little bit differently, and he does a great job on LinkedIn of posting this occasionally, that wisdom, and I just think I just think the world of him. So he went on to really big things after Taylor. He was the head of digital at Chipotle and went into the startup space. And he now is basically the founder of a new drink under the Budweiser umbrella called Hey Hey. And he took another guy from that Taylor crew named Matt Anger, who's his chief digital officer. And it's just amazing to watch them launch a brand together. And so there's so much that I've obviously had a ton of great leaders over the years, but there's just something about the way that he built and instilled a trust and a sense of confidence and quite honestly a camaraderie amongst a bunch of people who I marvel at all the time with this group. We probably would not have been friends. We're such different people, and he just created an environment that made us more than friends. We were collaborators on everything, and there's a lot that I take away from that in the way that I approach teamwork. And that is quite honestly my biggest motivation in this space is building great teams of people. And I think all the time about the things that he did to instill common ground amongst everybody and get everybody to have very, very different ideas, but towards the same goals. And to create that creative synergy where we loved talking to each other and building on each other's ideas. I mean, we loved it. We were on the phones with each other all the time. And that was pretty magical.
Love hearing that. I mean, behind every great professional and leader, there is someone that they've been mentored by or have learned from. And I'll tell you, man, like when I had Kyle Benzine on this podcast, a year or two ago, and he was speaking in those terms about you. So it all gets paid forward. It's very, very, very cool to see it. The baton gets passed.
I have worked with some unbelievable people, and I can't name them all, but the talent, Kyle being one of them, I mentioned a lot of them, but it's remarkable. The people that I've been able to learn from and see work and do just unbelievable things. It is amazing what the creative energy, the technical aspects. Like there's so much in the digital realm, right? Like it's everything. There is, and I don't want to say digital. I want to say in the fan growth space. There's so many ways and skill sets to approach this thing and build and move people from one step to the next. It's fascinating to try and put those pieces together and build a team of different parts that complement each other and want to work together.
Oh yeah. And how about you doing? Where can we find you as well as all things Dream across web and social and digital?
Follow the Dream channels. I don't post a ton, and there's a funny story. I genuinely mean this. I have a ton of creative energy, and I love to come up with ideas, Neil. but I like to do them for the groups I'm working for. I like to, and I quite honestly, I get more joy out of watching a team of people come up with an idea than me posting. And I talked a little bit about that before we jumped on here. I kind of lost my energy for me posting, but I have a ton of energy for great content, and I want to work with teams of people to put out content that impacts perception and the way people think, and that happens through our channels with the Dream now.
Well, I will say that you certainly accomplished that today on this podcast. You collaborated, cooperated, worked with me to help really put together hopefully something that's going to change the way people think in a good way and inspire people to do more great things in the fan growth space, engagement space, creative space. And I thank you so much for coming on today.
Please cut me down in this podcast, or people are gonna like fall asleep. This has went way too long, Neil. But so please don't make me sound like a blowhard.
Oh, no, every minute, just so much gold, man, and really appreciate you coming on. And we'll be watching the Dream and all their platforms and rooting for them on the court, of course, as well.
Neil, I had a great time. I appreciate that you reaching out and asking about this. I don't do this enough, and it was obviously I have a ton of respect for the work that you've done in this space, and the fact you've been doing this podcast for 10 years is unbelievable. So thank you for the opportunity and all the respect in the world to what you've built.
Such good stuff with Dan Gadd, SVP of Growth for the Atlanta Dream. Really cannot thank him enough for giving us so much time, so much wisdom today. I learned a ton. I came away inspired. I think you will have too. Just lots of good stuff that's going to stick with me for the rest of my career. Just cannot thank Dan enough for coming on the podcast today and sharing us so much good information and knowledge. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for listening. As always, you can find more episodes at dsmsports.net. Also, on your preferred podcast platform, make sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss any new episodes. You can find me on Twitter at NGH287, also on LinkedIn where I post more content. Hit me up there. Until next time, though, this is Neil Horwitz, your host, signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.